Okay, welcome, my dear friends. So today, one of the most important topic in plant anatomy, especially in secondary growth. In previous class, Dr. Manjula Madam Garu has clearly explained about the anomalous secondary growth and Dracena. So today, Madam is going to continue the anomalous secondary growth due to the cambial activity and other activity related to this anomalous secondary growth. So we would like to invite eminent resource person, Dr. Manjula Madam Garu, Assistant Professor, Department of Botany, RBVRR Women's College, Autonomous, Hyderabad. Madam, please welcome. Share your screen and start your session, Madam. Please welcome.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sir, is it visible screen?
Yes, madam.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir, for giving this opportunity. So today's topic is secondary growth and anomalous secondary growth in Boerhauvia and Dracena. So Boerhauvia, it is a dicot stem, whereas a Dracena, it is a monocot stem. So already we know that is secondary growth, which is occurs due to the result of cell division in the cambium. So generally secondary growth, generally the secondary growth mainly helps in the increase the width or girth of the stem. So the secondary growth is the growth that result from the cell division in the cambia or lateral meristems that mainly cause the stems and root thickening. That is increase in the thickness of the stem and also in the roots, increase the roots thickness. So it occurs in evergreen species and then in deciduous ones. Generally cambium, which is a cambium in a plants, it is a tissue layer, which is that layer which provides partially undifferentiated cells for a plant growth. Generally this cambium which is present in the vascular bundles region, that is in between the xylem and phloem, and it is a thin formative layer between the xylem and phloem of the most vascular plants, and which gives rise to new cells, and it is responsible for the secondary growth. Generally based on the presence and absence of this cambium. So generally if the cambium is present, it is called as open type, and if the cambium is absent, it is called as closed type of vascular bundles. So structure of the cambium. So generally here cambium, which is made up of two types of in shell, that is ray in shells and fusiform in shells. So generally ray in shells, these are isodiametric with flattened axis, and they gives rise to parenchymatous vascular rays, and which are formed from the radials of the stem, radial system of the cambia. So ray in shell mainly gives rise to parenchymatous vascular rays, that is xylem parenchyma and phloem parenchyma, whereas a fusiform in shell, these are elongated with tapering ends and they are spindle shape and occurs in middle region, and which gives rise to secondary xylem and secondary phloem. So here this is the structure of the vascular bundle. So it contains two types of in shell, that is ray in shells and fusiform in shells. So these fusiform in shells, they gives rise to secondary xylem and phloem, whereas the ray in shells, they gives rise to parenchyma. So next one is seasonal activity of the cambium. So generally cambium of most plants which remain active for the entire period of their life, generally cambium which is active, but the cambial cells divide and resulting cells mature to form the xylem and phloem elements. But this type of seasonal activity is usually found in the plants present in the tropical regions only, and not all plants shows this cambial activity. So the percentage of the ringless trees in the rainforest are, that is in India 75%, and here in Amazon 43%, and in Malaysia 15%, that is ringless trees, that is here activity is absent. So in regions with a definite seasonal climate and seasonal activity of the cambium, which is also ceased with the onset of unfavorable conditions. Generally, this cambial activity also depends on the climatic conditions. In autumn, it enters the dormant state and it lasts for the end of the summer. In spring, cambium again becomes active. So the duration of the cambial activity is also affected by the day length. So example, in Robinia, pseudoacacia, so the cambium is dormant under short day conditions. So this is also here this climatic conditions also influence this cambial activity. So secondary growth, generally the cambium cells formed in circular in cross section from the beginning onwards. So the cambial ring is partially primary and partially secondary. That is vascular cambium, which is primary, whereas the intervascular, it is a secondary structure. So the periderm. So periderm, which originates from the cortical cells, that is the outer layer, extrastellar in origin. So in dicots, for the mechanical support, the xylem is with the comparatively smaller vessels and greater fibers and less parenchyma. Generally, the xylem elements, which contain smaller vessels and xylem fibers are more and less parenchyma, whereas more amount of cork is produced for the protection. So generally, this cork, that is outer layer, which helps in the protection of the internal organs. So this is the secondary growth. So generally, when we take that section cutting of the stem, so it contains outer epidermis. So epidermis is followed by the cortex. Cortex is followed by the vascular bundles, that is primary phloem. And these are the vascular bundles. So here phloem and this one is the xylem. So in between the xylem and phloem, here the cambium is present. So it is called as a fascicular. So this is the primary xylem and this one is the primary phloem. So during the secondary growth, so this is the arrangement of the vascular bundles in the stem. So during the secondary growth, so this one, vascular cambium, that is intravascular cambium. And this one, the cambium which is present between these two vascular bundles, it is called as the intervascular bundles. So they are joined to form the ring. So this is called as the cambial ring. So during the secondary growth, this cambial ring, which produces secondary xylem towards inner side and secondary phloem towards outer side. So in this way, here the increase in the thickness of the stem will occur. So here first one, so this is the primary structure of the stem. So it is, when compared to the secondary structure, it is very less width. But here the increase in the width or breadth of the stem occurs due to this secondary growth. So in this way, here the formation of, in this way, formation of secondary growth will occur. So here the formation of the cambium will occur and formation of secondary tissues occur. So secondary growth in roots. So the cambial ring formed in a wavy in the beginning and later becomes circular. So the cambium ring is completely secondary in origin, and periderm, which originates from the pericycle, that is intrastellar in origin, that is within the stele pericycle. So in dicot root, xylem is with big thin-walled vessels and with few fibers and more parenchyma. So whereas in dicot stem, xylem with less vessels and more fibers and less parenchyma. So this is opposite to that, and less amount of cork is produced as root is underground. Whereas a more amount of cork is produced in the roots, because roots are aerial and which are protected by this cork. So this one, epidermis, here the TS of stem, dicot stem, so root. Here the epidermis, it is called as epiblema, cortex, endodermis, pericycle. So here this one is the primary phloem and this one is the secondary phloem. So these are arranged radially. So xylem and phloem are separately. This one is the xylem. This one is the xylem and this one is the phloem. So in between this, here the cambium is present. So here also during the secondary growth, this cambium they are united to form a cambial ring, and which produce the secondary xylem towards inner side and secondary phloem towards outer side. So here in this way, here also the increase in the girth or thickness of the stem occurred. So generally the term wood, which is used for the secondary xylem, which is produced due to the activity of the cambium in the stems of the gymnosperms and dicotyledonous angiosperm. Generally here the secondary growth which is seen in the gymnosperms, stems of gymnosperms and dicotyledons. So again here the wood, it is again classified into two types, that is softwood and hardwood. So softwood means wood which lacks vessels, it is called as a softwood. So another name for softwood is porous and non-porous wood. That is here pores means vessels are absent, so it is called as a non-porous wood, and which is found in gymnosperms. Softwood is seen in gymnosperms, and the quantity, that is tracheids are 90 to 95% tracheids are present. So more quantities of tracheids are present in the softwood, whereas hardwood it contains vessels, and it is also called as a porous wood because vessels are present. So if the vessels are present, it is called as a porous wood, and tracheids are only up to 5% in quantity, and wood fibers are abundant. So in hardwood, wood fibers are abundant, whereas in softwood, tracheids are abundant. So next one is the anomalous secondary growth. So generally anomalous secondary growth is the abnormal secondary growth, so which does not give rise to the normal pattern of single vascular cambium. So it is a abnormal activity. So which forms xylem and phloem, rather they possess the multiple cambia, which gives rise to abnormal secondary structure. So generally only one cambium, that is during the secondary growth only one cambium is present, and which produce the secondary xylem and secondary phloem. But here multiple cambia which are present, gives rise to the abnormal secondary structure. So anomalous secondary thickenings in Dracaena. So the secondary growth which happened by the abnormal growth from the abnormal cambium in monocots. So in monocotyledon, generally vascular bundles are closed type. That is, closed means here the cambium is absent, and the cambium being absent, the secondary growth is also absent. But in some plants like Dracaena, Yucca, Agave, so secondary growth will takes place. So the normal cambium either does not develop, or this abnormal cambium may either develop from the cortex or pericycle and shows abnormal activity. So here the cambium which is developed from the cortex region or from the pericycle region, and which shows abnormal activity. So the young stem has a typical structure, that is epidermis, which is followed by the sclerenchymatous hypodermis. Next one is a large number of closely arranged bundles, that is vascular bundles are scattered in the ground tissue. So this is the normal structure of the young stem of monocot stem of Dracaena, monocot. So this one, transverse section of the Dracaena, so which contains epidermis, cortex. Next one is, here these are the vascular bundles which are scattered in the cortex or ground tissue. So here during the secondary growth, so here this cambium, formation of cambium will occur from the cortical cells, and it produces secondary tissue, secondary vascular bundles. So this one is the ground. So in the ground tissue, these many vascular bundles are scattered. So one of the outer layer of the cells from the ground tissue becomes meristematic and function as a cambium. So this cambium formed in the region which has ceased elongation. So the activity of this cambium is more on inner side and very little on the outer side. So this where it forms the only parenchyma. So generally this cambium which produces more tissues, there is more parenchymatous cells inner side and very little on the outer side. So on the inner side, it forms a xylem and parenchyma. So generally here this cambium which produces more amount of parenchyma cells towards inner side and less amount of parenchyma outside. So first it produces parenchyma cells only, but here this inner parenchymatous cells, some becomes meristematic and act as the this vascular cambium. Okay, cambium, which behaves as a cambium. So the activity of this cambium is more. So here on the inner side, it forms the xylem and parenchyma in alternate patches. So the inner parenchymatous cells are called as the conjunctive tissues. So after a shot, so while the activity of the cambium on inner side changes and above the xylem, so it starts forming the phloem. And then again the xylem. So the xylem formed earlier has a bigger vessels, and around each vascular bundle is developed sclerenchymatous sheath. So here, first the activity of this cambium, which produces, okay, this cambium which produces more tissues inner side and very little on the outer side. So on the inner side, which forms the xylem and parenchyma in alternate patches, it produces xylem and again parenchyma cells, again xylem, like that. So it is called the parenchymatous cells which are present inner side. They are called as a conjunctive tissue. So after a shot, so the activity of the cambium on inner side changes, and above the xylem, it starts forming the phloem and again xylem. So here, this is the abnormal activity. So the xylem formed earlier has bigger vessels, and around each vascular bundle is developed sclerenchymatous sheath. Each vascular bundle, it develops the sclerenchymatous sheath. So this one. So these are the vascular bundles. So it produces okay. So here this one is the cambium. So which produces secondary vascular bundle. So here conjunctive tissue, inner side conjunctive tissue and outer side secondary vascular bundle. So these are the conjunctive tissue. And this one is the vascular bundles. So the cambium after some time alters its activity and forms a xylem on the inner side and at those places where it was previously forming the parenchyma. And parenchyma in place of xylem. So similar to earlier case. So again, it will continues, and this activity of cambium goes on changing regularly, and more rings of vascular bundles are formed. So cark cambium is formed below the hypodermis and forms the cark and cark cambium in normal fashion. That is an outer side of the cortex region. So here the cark is produced by this cark cambium. So in this way, here more number of vascular bundles. So it produces a conjunctive tissue. So it produces inner side parenchyma and xylem and out, and after some time, so it changes its activity and it producing the phloem. Like that, here the activity will continue. So this is about the anomalous secondary growth in Dracaena. So it is an anomalous activity of the abnormal activity of the cambium of abnormal anomalous production of this abnormal activity of the abnormal cambium. So next one is the anomalous secondary thickenings in dicot stem. So Dracaena, it is a monocot stem. So generally in Dracaena, generally in monocot, secondary growth is absent, but here in Dracaena, anomalous secondary growth is occurred. So next one is anomalous secondary growth in Boerhauvia. So anomalous secondary growth of the dicot, that is Boerhauvia stem, which shows the following tissues, that is outer epidermis. So epidermis, which is single layered and which consists of small and radially elongated cells. So here epidermis, general epidermis is which is single layered and which are they are made up of small and radially elongated cells. So, and here on the epidermis, multicellular epidermal hairs are arised from some cells. And the thick cuticle is present on the epidermis. On the epidermis, cuticle is present, and some stomata are also present on the epidermis. So next one is cortex. So it is differentiated and consists of few layered collenchymatous hypodermis, which is followed by the chlorenchyma. So generally cortex, it is differentiated into outer and inner cortex. So, and outer cortex, which is made up of collenchyma, and inner cortex, which is made up of chlorenchyma. Chlorenchyma is nothing but the parenchyma cells, which contains a chloroplast. So, collenchyma is 3 to 4 cells deep, but generally near the stomata. So this is the structure of the TS of Boerhauvia. So it contains outer epidermis. So these are the epidermal hairs are present on the epidermis, and so this one is the cortex region. So cortex outer collenchymatous and inner chlorenchymatous cortex. So next it is followed by the vascular bundles. So in Boerhauvia, so here 3 rings of vascular bundles are present. So outer ring, middle ring, and inner ring. So outer ring contains many vascular bundles. 8 to 6, 14 to 21 vascular bundles are present in the outer ring, and here 6 to 10, 12 vascular bundles are present in the middle ring, and central, that is in the medullary vascular, 2 large medullary vascular bundles are seen in the medulla region. So here the vascular bundles are present in 3 rows. So chlorenchyma is present inner to the collenchyma in the form of 3 to 7 layers, and chlorenchymatous cells are thin-walled, oval in shape, and full of chloroplast, and encloses many intercellular spaces. So endodermis is clearly developed and made up of many tubular thickened wall cells. So next one is a pericycle is present. So inner to the endodermis is a pericycle, and which is parenchymatous, but some places it is represented by the isolated patches of sclerenchyma. In some places, sclerenchymatous patches are present in the pericycle. So next one is the vascular bundles. So vascular bundles are present in 3 rings. That is, in the inner ring, innermost ring are present 2 large bundles. In the middle ring, the number of which ranges from 6 to 14, while the outermost ring consists of 15 to 20 vascular bundles. So the vascular bundles of the innermost and middle rings are medullary bundles. So because they are present in the medulla region, inner and middle vascular bundles. So vascular bundles are generally conjoined, collateral, and endarc. That is protoxylem towards inner side and metaxylem towards outside, endarc condition. So the 2 vascular bundles of the innermost ring are large, oval, and lie opposite to each other, with their xylem facing towards the center and phloem towards outer side. So middle ring consists of 6 to 14 and small vascular bundles. So this one, so these are middle vascular bundles, so inner vascular bundles, and these are the middle vascular bundles. So the vascular bundles of inner and middle rings may show the little secondary growth. Inner and middle vascular bundles show little secondary growth, whereas the phloem consists of sieve tubes, companion cells, and phloem parenchyma, while the xylem consists of vessels, tracheids, and xylem parenchyma. So outermost ring of the vascular bundles, which contains intervascular cambium, so which is absent in other 2 rings. So only in the outermost ring only this intervascular cambium is present, whereas it is absent in inner and middle ring. So the cambium, which develops secondarily from the pericycle and becomes active. So here the cambium, development of the cambium, which occurs by the pericycle and becomes active, and it cuts off secondary phloem towards the outer side and secondary xylem towards the inner side. So due to these changes, the primary phloem becomes crushed and present next to the pericycle. So primary xylem is situated near the pith. So intervascular cambium also soon becomes active and cuts internally the rows of cells, which become thick-walled and lignified and are known as a conjunctive tissue. So here in intravascular cambium, which producing secondary tissues, whereas the intervascular cambium, which produce the conjunctive tissue. So it is developed and parenchymatous are present in the center. It is well developed. Sorry. So intervascular cambium, which produces conjunctive tissue. This is conjunctive tissues are, these are thick-walled and lignified cells. So next one is a pith. So it is well developed and parenchymatous and present in the center. So here due to this outer ring only. So it produces in the intervascular cambium, it produces a more amount of secondary vascular bundles, whereas in between the intervascular cambium, which produce in the conjunctive tissue. So due to which here, this is also an anomalous activity. So this is about the Boerhauvia, anomalous secondary growth in Boerhauvia. Sir.
Okay, madam. Okay, any doubts regarding of this class, my dear friends? I hope you are clearly understood what madam has discussed here. So I hope you are enjoy this class because of the beauty of the nature we are seeing in monocots as well as dicots also. Generally, monocot plants or monocot trees does not show any secondary growth. But madam has clearly explained anomalous secondary growth in Dracena. We have already seen. Generally, dicot stems, they shows secondary growth, normal secondary growth. But some of the dicots, they can show anomalous secondary growth. We have discussed. Madam has clearly explained about the Boerhauvia anomalous secondary growth due to the cambial activities and vascular bundles. So, beauty of the nature, we are enjoy lots from our madam class, and nature is very great teacher because of each and every corner touches the nature, because of we are all learn from the nature. And these anomalous secondary growth, and even though the annual rings, just because of the seasonal changes as the main cause for the occurring of these growth rings. So based on these growth rings, we are identified the age of the plants through carbon dating process and the counting of these annual rings or growth rings. Okay, so I hope you are enjoy this class. Madam, thank you very much. Tomorrow we will going to meet same time. Thank you.
Okay.